Electioneering is officially in full swing. The ANC is meeting the Bishop of the Zion Christian Church in Moria, Limpopo today. It's the biggest church in the country with more than 4 million members. Talk to us about the significance of the visit. eNCA senior researcher Angelo Fick joins us in studio. So is this what you'd call a well-timed visit ahead of an election, Angelo?
Yes, and I think it's a continuation of what we've seen the African National Congress do, which was visit traditional leaders. They're now visiting a church, and I think what's significant about this particular visit is that this is a church that said, and the ANC statement, reiterated this, that it is above politics, that it is really simply concerned with the spiritual welfare of its members. But that, is what the church's official position is. But of course, any political party knows that a constituency of 4 million people is a substantial block of votes that is potentially there for you if you're interested.
This is interesting that EFF leader visited the church a couple of weeks ago. Would you say there's an existing relationship there?
I don't know, because my sense is that the church has consistently signalled it is not interested in, one, there was a rumour that it wanted to start a political party. It very quickly quelled those rumours. Its traditional position was that it was not interested in the politics of the day, in that way, in trying to influence it. But we've also seen the flip side of this, which is that the African National Congress has gone through a series of phases of its relationship with clergy and religious people in the country. There was a period where it relied on religious leaders to support its message against apartheid. Then there was a period where senior leaders in the party indicated that religious people and religious organizations should stick with what it is that they do and not interfere in politics. And this seems to be a return to a different version of the ANC's relationship with organized religion in South Africa.
Well, that's an important point you make, Angelo, and I was going to ask you where the party is now with regard to this, because do we simply associate that period of asking the church to divorce itself from politics with Jacob Zuma specifically?
I don't think it's as easily divisible as that it's simply under Jacob Zuma the party moved away, because the critiques of the party's positions and of governments formed by the party and their positions come from slightly before Jacob Zuma's time in power. We cannot forget that there were critiques of Thabo Mbeki's position, for example, on HIV/AIDS from church leaders, and there were also critiques of the inequality that became such a crucial mark of post-millennial South Africa from church figures fairly early on. So this isn't just about Jacob Zuma's relationship, and I think we need to move to a position in South Africa where our analysis doesn't put Jacob Zuma at the center of some kind of delightful sea change of a horrible before and a delightful after. I think that there are more complicated ways of looking at our recent history. But at the same time, I think the ANC itself signals that in this new phase of its wanting to return to being the moral centre or the centre of moral debate in politics in South Africa, it is impossible to not go around to talk to those organisations, and many of them are faith-based organisations, that say that part of their relationship to South Africans is precisely around this issue of morality and ethics. And so if an ANC wants to reconfigure its relationship to ethics and morality by saying it is the vanguard movement that determines what the debate is, it cannot do so without confronting its relationships with faith-based organizations, and this one, the ZCC, is a significant stakeholder in the faith-based community, and so you would have to talk to people in that space, even if they are not going to either support your political agenda or are saying they're beyond the fray of politics and actually in a different realm.
Angelo, can church congregants, even those belonging to a very specific organisation like the ZCC, can they be viewed as a homogenous group that perhaps think the same way politically?
Not at all, and I don't think that any political party would take such a position. So the idea that if you court the leaders of a religious organisation, they will somehow tell the followers which to vote is not what I think the ANC is doing here. And I don't think any political party in 2018 would be as crude as to want to do that. However, what you do have access to is a certain kind of legitimation of your own position. If you're seen to be hanging out with, meeting with particular people, it signals to the followers of those religious leaders that you are interested in them, and it also signals to them that you have a certain kind of recognizability by those leaders. So it is the idea that you are associated, I will know you by your friends, so to speak. And that, I think, has powerful resonance in legitimating legitimating the party with people who may have felt that the party had strayed from whatever the moral vision was that people felt it had in 1994. This is in essence a return to what the party believes itself to be. How that goes across to ordinary people will really only be tested once the election results come out. Now, Limpopo is traditionally a stronghold for the ANC, but we've seen that that particular strength has waned election after election, and the rise of the EFF in the province cannot be undersold. So while the EFF is not there in huge numbers, it is a significant force in the northern part of the country, Limpopo province. The Democratic Alliance launched its election manifesto in Polokwane in 2014, and so people are aware that these ANC strongholds are open to being, shall we say, whittled away at. And part of that means speaking to the organizations that people find so central to their lives. And the ZCC is not just nationally important, it's very important in Limpopo because that is the province in which it finds its most significant site, Moria, which is where people a few weeks from now will be congregating in large numbers to observe one of the most important religious markings of their faith.
How do we as objective observers read this kind of visit by a political party governing a secular state?
Well, I think it's the same way in which we should read a democratically elected government and its officials visiting traditional leaders in a democracy. That tension between the old and the new, the tradition and the tradition and modernity, the tensions that make up the colourful fabric which is South Africa. None of us are unitary. We're not all just monolithic people or either or. We're many things often contradictorily. And so it isn't surprising that political parties want to deal with those internal, what look like contradictions, but are actually complexities, and say to people, while we govern a secular state, we recognize your desire to express faith and recognize its importance in your life, and at the same time we have to observe the fact that we live in a secular, democratic, constitutionally governed state, but recognize your interests as a Christian, a Muslim, a Jew, a member of the Bahia faith, or a traditional African spiritual practitioner. So it's not, I think, just cynical maneuvering. There may be an element of, shall we say, opportunism when political parties go to do faith observances as political parties versus individual politicians who may have genuine faith and practice their faith off camera in ways that are not necessarily meant to be an opportunity to visit. But at the same time, we shouldn't just dismiss politicians as cynical, because it is also that they need to pay attention to the electorate's interests in order for the electorate to vote for them. That is the business of politics. It's not the cynical business of politics. It is the business of politics. Whether or not this becomes an issue the ANC would have to deal with, I think, can only be tested in 2019, when those people who are members of these varieties of communities, whether it's traditional communities when it comes to traditional leaders, or whether it's faith-based communities such as members of the ZCC, whether they vote in large enough numbers for ANC candidates, and whether they then believe that the ANC's project is amenable to the project that they believe is so central to their lives in these faith-based organizations.
Thanks for deconstructing that so well for us. Angelo Fick, our eNCA senior researcher.